Welcome to the next episode of the Leadership Lab. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by the Dean of London Business School, Sergei Guriev. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Susanna, for having me.
We're just so thrilled that you could join us. We talk a lot with our scholars about leadership being a journey, not a destination. Where did it all begin for you?
I think it's the right way to think about this because leaders are not born. You sometimes just need to step into a role which grows into a leadership role. For me, it was me being a rector, dean, CEO of the new economics school. What I wanted to be an academic economist living in Russia, and I was not a founder, but we developed New Economic School into a modern, Western-style, global, world-class economics institution, and somebody had to run it. And among us, people who came back from the US and wanted to do modern economics in Russia, we just had to develop this institution, and one of us had to lead it, and I just stepped into this role, and I learned a lot on the job. I would love to have a degree, have had a degree from London Business School to become a leader, and I envy our Laidlaw scholars going through LBS programs because we teach them a lot of stuff I should have benefited from when I was running a school back in Moscow 20 years ago.
Before that, in your childhood or as a student, did you have any leadership roles?
Of course I did. In Soviet Union, straight A students were supposed to be also socially active, lead whatever pioneer organizations, Komsomol organizations. But the real leadership is actually when you excite people with a vision, when you actually have a project. And for me, that was the first real leadership experience was running a university in Russia with a clearly defined vision, explaining to students and to colleagues why this organization is making that country and the world, therefore, a better place. And that is what real leadership is for me.
Your career has spanned, obviously, academia as a scholar, policy making, and also, as you say, leadership of academic institutions. How did you move between those different roles? Was it intentional?
Yes, this is a good question. I always was looking for opportunities to learn new things. Overall, I have a relative advantage in being able to do several things at the same time, and many academics are introverts who are not excited about doing leadership, performing leadership roles. I'm also an introvert as an academic, but probably less so than others. And so for that matter, whenever there was an opportunity to do something for my colleagues, for the students, for the society, I try to pick up those opportunities. So in that sense, it's intentional. But on the other hand, many of those transitions were unplanned. And some of those roles I didn't envision to take at some points in my career, but later on I thought, why not?
As you know, ethical leadership is really important to us. We have our undergraduate program at 20 partner universities, soon to be 22, and ethics is a strong part of that. You, in your various roles, have had to make choices around the values that are important to you. And in 2013, you actually left Russia partly because of some of the choices that you made. Won't ask you to rehash all of that now in terms of what those choices were, but were you conscious about how brave you were being at the time and what the consequences of them would be?
Right. I'm not really brave, right? I didn't stay in Russia. I decided not to take a risk of going to Russian prison, and don't recommend anybody going to Russian prison. I have friends who are much braver and who went until the bitter end and died, either being shot or died in prison. And for me, that was not brave. It was just consistency. You talked about leadership and values. I think leadership is about helping others to move towards a common goal. And the easiest way to do it is to have a clearly articulated vision of why we should work towards this common goal. Once you articulate this vision, you have to stick to it. You have to be transparent how you yourself work towards this common goal. And at some point, you just cannot be inconsistent in what you're saying. And in my case, I had to leave Russia because I kept saying outside of the classroom what I was saying inside the classroom, right? If I teach certain thing in economics classes, in political economy classes, we are saying, look, those kinds of political and legal institutions are good for economic growth. And you step outside of the classroom and you see that your country is doing something opposite of what you're teaching in the classroom, you cannot stay silent, and you, in a sense, you talk too much, and that leads to a situation where Vladimir Putin and myself had to be choosing different countries to be in. And so this is not about bravery. It's about being a consistent traveler on this journey towards mission of the institution. Bravery for me is something different. Bravery is about making difficult choices, and cowardness is more about kicking the can down the road. You know you need to make this difficult decision. You know it's going to be painful. You know that you make people unhappy about you. You know you yourself will be probably unhappy about yourself. And the brave decision is to make this decision. And lack of bravery is to delay this decision and think that the decision will take care of itself somehow, disappear on its own. And I think this is what lack of bravery is. You know that it's not going to solve itself. You need to step up and do it. And this I think is what the rational, pragmatic approach to bravery should be.
That's so interesting because it reminds me of the fact that you've been talking about leadership through the eyes of Hamlet, and obviously indecision is at the very heart of the play from obviously Hamlet's perspective.
I fully agree, yes. Hamlet is a person that we want to sympathize with, but indeed he delays making decisions. Sometimes he hesitates a lot, and that actually turns both viewers and other characters in the play away from him.
What are some of the other leadership lessons that we can learn from Hamlet?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is the role of negative feedback, criticism, critical feedback. I should explain that this piece you're talking about, it's an article I wrote for the program of the new Hamlet for the Royal Shakespeare Society. So whoever goes to the new Hamlet production will see a program which opens with those takeaways from Hamlet on leadership. And indeed, in Hamlet, you have the king who likes people who bring him good news. He literally greets Polonius at some point saying, I like you because you are the father of good news. You only bring good news to me. And of course, this is the most dangerous thing when you only encourage positive feedback and you discourage negative feedback. I should say that it's a human nature because people don't like conflictual situations. People don't like when they are not liked. And they almost subconsciously dislike colleagues who bring them critical feedback. And so it takes an effort to actually remind yourself that you should be grateful for bad news. Even if people bring you problems without offering solutions, it's also very helpful because I've seen leaders who would say, I welcome constructive criticism. If you bring me a problem, also suggest a solution. But this is naive because usually problems emerge in one part of organization and solutions may be found in another part of organization. And so this is your job as the leader to bridge the gap between the problems and potential solutions you can find in other part of organization or outside of the organization. So I think this is the most difficult part of being a leader, actually overpower your natural subconscious preference for positive feedback. unfortunately, most of the emails, most of the messages that land on the desk of a leader are actually messages about problems, not about excitement, happiness, and good news.
Do you think there is something, though, empowering about saying to people, when you bring me a problem, also at least have thought about the solution, so that there isn't a feeling of the leader being the one who has to have all the answers, or who takes on maybe that more of a sort of patriarchal command and control leadership figure?
I agree with you, Susanna. I think the role of the leader is also to make sure that people own the decisions. So indeed, the leader cannot say only I make the decisions. And sometimes I'm actually very happy to, during the conversation, not to speak too much and allow other colleagues to come up with solutions to problems raised during the meeting. Because, of course, when people own the decisions, they are more likely to go an extra mile delivering on those decisions, implementing those decisions. And I think it's very important that the leader does not project this image of omnipotent, omniscient, and benevolent ruler who knows everything and can solve all the problems and others cannot. So in that sense, of course, it's great if people bring you a potential solution and you say, my job is to support you. But what I'm saying, unfortunately, very often people bring you problems without perfect solutions.
Yeah. You've talked a lot about how currently transparency and the sort of radical transparency that social media imposes changes how people need to think about leadership. Can you share a bit more about that?
Yes, I think current elites don't realize to the great extent, they don't realize to what extent the world has become much more transparent than 50 years ago or even 30 years ago. With the internet and social media, every mistake you make may be filmed, recorded, and go viral on social media. That makes the job of a leader very hard, and that creates a lot of risk aversion. I think that is very dangerous when leaders become paralyzed and avoid taking risks, avoid making difficult decisions. I think that is a mistake to be paralyzed, because eventually success comes from actions, not from inactions. But what the leader should do, the leader should explain to colleagues, this is going to be a difficult decision. We are taking a risk. It is not impossible that we will lose when we go that direction, but we are making this rational step forward. And when we actually lose, I should not be criticized for making a mistake, because that was part of the plan, if you like. We were not lucky. Maybe we've not done our job analyzing the market, capacity, capability, resource constraints correctly, but at least we tried. And otherwise this radical transparency that we live in will paralyze us. But on the other hand, I think transparency is very useful because of this issue of anchoring people's ambition on a common goal. It's much easier to do in a transparent environment. So when you say the same thing to everybody, you instill more trust in what you ask people to do than if you have this decentralized web of communications, which sometimes are not perfectly aligned. And I think in that sense, transparency helps mission-driven organizations a great deal.
I read your book, Spin Dictators, with great interest and I think some horror as well, although perhaps there was some hope at the end. But what struck me about that was that very often bad actors use social media more effectively than perhaps those who we might consider to be better leaders or those who embrace ethical leadership. Is that fair?
Social media as a platform does have certain features that makes it more suitable for, say, populist and authoritarian populist politicians. So I should tell you that as a scholar of populism, I've seen many examples in history when populists would use state-of-the-art communications technology to circumvent mainstream elites. So actually the first populist leader, William Jennings Bryan, presidential candidate in 1996, was extremely innovative in using telegraph and railroads. His campaign was actually a campaign where he sent a lot of telegrams and used railroads to zoom throughout the country. There is a very influential paper written by coincidence by my wife and her co-authors about Nazi radio, how Goebbels used radio to a great effect, communicating his message. Usually populists are doing that because the mainstream incumbent elites control the established communication technology. And to circumvent the elites, anti-elite politicians, populists, use a new technology. And of course, social media are a new tool which incumbent politicians, incumbent elites still don't know how to use. They're more accustomed to newspapers, TV, so on, while social media is an innovative tool which helps you to reach out to the voters directly. Now, social media is different from, say, radio or telegraph. In what way? Social media is cheaper. The barriers to entry are very low, so a populist can say, I don't need to be rich to connect to tens of millions of voters. The other thing, it's a two-way communication tool, which is very important for populists to say, I hear the voice of the people, I'm constantly in touch with the people. And in that sense, social media is actually a very important device that modern populists can use. The other thing is the business model of social media is advertisement-based. So it's attention-based. And basically social media algorithms, whether the owners want it or not, but they train their algorithm to keep your attention, which means that social media promote messages which are more likely to grab your attention, and these messages are more likely to be false or misleading and outrageous and negative. There is a lot of research which shows this negativity bias. Negative messages criticizing status quo, criticizing the elites, sometimes messages which are not as boring as true facts, true content. These messages go further. And this is why it's not a coincidence that some populists or some authoritarian populists are so good in using social media.
So how do we combat that?
Well, there are different efforts in regulating social media, and actually in the European Union there is a Digital Services Act which combines a lot of good ideas about this. So after 2016, Facebook, at that point it was called Facebook, suggested that the social media should recruit fact checkers. Basically, you run an AI algorithm identifying suspicious posts, and if there is a high score of misinformation, falsehoods in this post, you recruit a certified fact checker to flag if this post is correct or incorrect. So this is the system which may work, but you need to invest a lot more money than social media companies have done. They underinvested in this fact checking, and now they're actually dismantling this fact checking after the 2024 election. So the European regulators actually try to say that self-regulation is not enough. We want to oblige social media companies to go extra mile. Now, in our research, we show something very simple. We show that a simple nudge, a simple priming message can actually help. If I just show you a sentence saying, remember that there is a lot of misinformation, disinformation on social media, you are much more likely to share true news and not share false news. And this is just to make you think for 10, 15 seconds, because a lot of sharing of false news happens as a knee-jerk reaction. We as humans, as a biological species, have not been evolving to handle social media sharing. We had other tools to make our living. We had other priorities. Our brain is not built to handle instantaneous processing of algorithmically designed information. So making people think, making people taking slow routes rather than fast routes. There is a famous book by Nobel Prize winner Danny Kaufman, Thinking Fast, Fast and Slow. So moving to the slow system where you have a rational processing of this information really, really helps.
Isn't there some research which suggests that correcting false information actually just embeds the false information?
Yes, it does, and I actually have a paper on this as well, where we show people misleading or incorrect quotes from a populist politician, and then to another group of people we show false information with fact checking, and to some people we even show just facts without misleading quotes or incorrect quotes from a populist politician. And we find that simple trigger of thinking about the issue of immigration that was about immigration makes people more likely to vote for this politician. Simply because this politician makes the issue of immigration salient, and increasing saliency of immigration shifts people towards the populist politician focusing on immigration. That said, people learn the facts. So whenever they see the facts, for example, in that particular paper, we talked about the fact that it's not like 99% of Syrian refugees are men. They're actually half of them are men. We had data on this, and we showed people data. And when we asked those people, do you know what the percentage of men are among Syrian refugees? They would give us a correct number, but they would still vote for the populist politician. So a lot of that is about the fact that people don't have time to think about these issues, don't want to think about those issues. And I'll give you a simple example. When you buy a pack of cigarettes or a bottle of alcohol, there is a health warning on that. And what we are saying is things like that may work for social media as well.
It's really interesting. In terms of how organizations either support or are complicit, I guess, in allowing this to go on, do you think that, so Meta knows that their algorithms promote false information. They're removing the fact checkers. Other organizations are still advertising and therefore giving money to Meta. Do you think that organizations should hold themselves to a higher standard, or is there a conflict with their fiduciary responsibilities to shareholders? And for context, Lord Laidlaw, who funds all of the foundation's work, has removed all of his investments in Meta because he says we cannot say that we're about developing ethical leadership and then profit from an organization which seems to be undermining truth.
I think different organizations answer this question differently. And indeed, some organizations become public benefit corporations, so-called B Corps. We are talking in May 2025. We just learned that OpenAI, for example, decided not to be a for-profit corporation, but instead to be public benefit corporation. This is a corporation which, in addition to profit, also pursues a socially important goal. And this is different from just a for-profit corporation. And I think much of that comes from external factors. In principle, once you have external shareholders, you have to be very clear when you talk to external shareholders what and how you're going to achieve. And on paper, the fiduciary duty is actually to maximize profits. On the other hand, you can come into a job of a CEO and say, I think that long-term shareholder value is not compatible with making some unethical choices in the short run. And the shareholders can say, we agree with you and recruit you. Or shareholders can say, no, we want somebody who maximizes market capitalization at any given day, and the market will guide us towards long-term maximization of market capitalization, because today's market value is actually a reflection of the future as well. So in that sense, talking about transparency is very important here, because you can actually at the outset agree with your shareholders what and how you want to achieve. Once you're hired, you then are going to be evaluated and maybe at some point fired by your shareholders for deviating from the promised course of action. Shareholders may change. Somebody can take over your organization, buy out existing shareholders and say, I don't like this course of action, I need a new CEO. But I think as long as you're honest to this strategy and vision, I think that's fine. And unfortunately, what we've seen in recent years, some corporations with the same set of shareholders and CEO would change their course over a year, or even with a higher frequency. That said, I should say that external forces also matter. For example, today I can say ethical leadership is good for long-term shareholder value. But then reputational concerns may change, right? Previously, I would say we cannot pursue unethical business practices because our customers will punish us, and our workers will leave. And my shareholders will say, you're right, you're right. But then if you see that the society changes and customers no longer care about ethical practices and workers no longer care about values, maybe shareholders will say the world has changed. Maybe we need to change our values as well. So in that sense, this is a very complex conversation. But I think what I would recommend to everybody, an open conversation at the outset, thinking about what exactly you have in mind and how you're going to pursue those objectives.
You've talked before about the fact that ethical leadership can mean different things to different people. And good people can vehemently disagree and both be absolutely true to their own values. Can you talk a bit more about that sort of situation?
Of course, different people have different views on certain issues, and for me, this is of course the most important job of a leader, to bring people from different backgrounds, different cultures together and help them prosper and be productive. And this is what London Business School is doing with the support of Laidlaw Foundation. We are bringing people from all over the world, right? 95% of our students are international. Many of them come from countries which don't like each other, fight each other, don't recognize each other's borders. And these people are brought up in a different way. They have different values. And my job is not to figure out how to solve their conflicts back home. My job is to make sure that they feel safe here and pursue their life goals, the reason why they're here. And so I think sometimes I can just say, we don't take a position on the issues which divide you. We just, this is what we are here for. We are going to teach you business. We want to bring you into a space where you can actually advance on your life project, and this is what is very important. But as you can imagine, people who are brought up in countries which are at war, sometimes very good people, sometimes have very, very different views on who's right and who's wrong in this war.
You've lived in Russia, you're now also a French citizen, you've lived in the US, you're now living in the UK. What has that taught you about different countries, different cultures, leadership differences?
I think these countries have very different leadership styles, very different values, what you're talking about, attitude to inequality, attitude to fairness of success. These countries have very, very different views. These countries have different attitudes, for example, to intergenerational justice, to what extent we should care about the future of the world, to what extent we need to protect the planet so our kids inherit a sustainable business model, if you like, sustainable economy and sustainable planet. So, and of course, these nations have very different views on gender equality. Now, what I've learned, though, is as a scholar of history, of society and business, I can also see that things change, and things change for the better. And I'll give you an example on gender equality. There is a TV series called Mad Men about Madison Avenue company in 1960s, which shows how United States go through equal rights transformation, where women suddenly become professionals, where people stop cheating their wives, stop drinking while driving. People of different ethnicities and religions start progressing through professional hierarchy. And I could recognize 1950s US business environment in 2000s Russia. Right? I could see how 2000s Russia is so similar to the United States 50 years before. And that created hope as well, right? So the fact that people have alcohol in their office doesn't mean that it will always stay there. It was the case in 1950s Madison Avenue, and then it changed, right? And people treated women badly. Well, executives treated women badly in 1950s, but better in 1960s and better in 2010s in the US as well, after Me Too movement, for example, right? And so there is progress. This progress is uneven. The attitudes are different. Some attitudes will remain different, but you can see how the world is actually becoming a better place.
That's very positive. Obviously, we have Laidlaw scholars here specifically to try and propel more women into the C-suite. And whilst I'm encouraged when you put it in that context that there is progress, there does still seem to be quite a long way to go. How do you think LBS and scholarships like ours helps promote that equality?
Yes, I would like to thank the foundation, Lord Laidlaw, and you yourself personally, Susanna, for this. I think this is very important. The very existence of Laidlaw scholarships signals to young, ambitious women that they're welcome and sought after. Mm-hmm. So we really want more women at LBS in all programs. We want them to succeed. And the fact that we advertise those opportunities actually helps us attract best and brightest female business school students. Now, the progress is there. So, for example, now we have about 45% of our MBA students who are women. This is not parity. And actually, in any given year, among top business schools in the world, there would be 0 or 1 school which has 50% of women in the MBA program. But it's so much better than before. When I talk to previous generations of MBA alumni of LBS, they cannot believe me how far we've gone. But of course, as you rightly said, we are not there yet. And since we teach different generations of students, you can also see the difference between MBA students who are in their late 20s, executive MBA students who are more in mid-30s, late 30s, and pre-experienced master students who are in their early 20s. Pre-experienced master students, in every single program, we have majority of women. Why? Because they come to us from a new generation where there are more students in the university who are female than male. So it's only natural that people who come out from these cohorts of students are more likely to be a majority in the business program for pre-experienced masters. MBA students are older, so they reflect the reality of 10 years ago, and executive MBA are even older, and so there we only have 40% of women. So I think, once again, we see progress in those numbers very clearly. We work on this, and we highly appreciate your support, because, as I said, it's not just money, but it's also a strong signal that it is a priority for us. We want more women to succeed, and a lot of people are saying there is an economic rationale in this. We cannot afford half of the humanity not being productive and successful, and I fully agree with that, but it's also an issue of values. I think nobody can stand up and say, if you're born with this gender,
Yep.
You should be predetermined for this career or lack of career. And I think nobody can honestly say that. And once you are committed to equality of opportunity, gender equality is a no-brainer, whatever economic case is or is not there.
Do you think the current situation in the US, where firms are actively rowing back from their DEI programs, will negatively impact that positive momentum that you've been talking about?
I think it's a temporary setback. I think if you look at the generational change in values, this is the progress you cannot stop. You cannot tell Generation Z members that women are lower class than men, right? And I think eventually the pressure from the new generation will change a lot of things in the US as well. So I strongly believe in this progress. This is what one prominent sociologist, Ronald Inglehart, called silent revolution. He called it, he wrote a paper in a book in late 60s, early 70s, saying we have this generational shift which brings progressive values, because we talk about equality of opportunity, and once we do it, you just cannot pretend that we have equality of opportunity when you still have a glass ceiling. And I think commitment to gender equality is here to stay, simply because the new generation is born with this something taken for granted. So I think this fight will continue, simply because younger generation, which will outnumber older generation as time goes by, will step into leadership positions and eventually call the shots.
You've been at LBS for about a year now. What has surprised you the most about it?
I'm positively surprised how at home everybody is, wherever you come from. And you mentioned that I had to leave Russia. London is a place where everybody is supposed to be at home. And this is exactly how it works, and LBS is even further in this trajectory into being a truly global institution. And for people like myself who cannot go back to home country, this is actually very important. So I'm here and nobody cares what accent I have. And people come from all over the place, whatever religion, ethnicity, language, accent, gender you have. And the idea is everybody should work together. And this is what is unique about London and about London Business School.
That belief in the importance of almost like a global citizen, I can't even say it, citizenry? No, that's still not right. But being a global citizen, right, is something that is at the heart of LBS. And yet there is pushback in the UK, particularly at the moment. How do you feel about that?
I think global business schools like LBS are very important for prosperity of humankind, but also of the UK. I think UK business model is about bringing talent from all over the world. And I think it's a mistake to limit the influx of talent. I think the government should not underappreciate to what extent the whole prosperity and business model of London and the UK is based on innovation, on talent, on entrepreneurship. And of course, if you only bring talent from one country, UK is a wonderful country, but it's not a big country. Yep. If you only work for your local market, that's not going to fly. And by bringing people from all over the world, you actually have access to a much bigger pool of talent. And this is why other countries and cities want to replicate success of London. So for example, a city like Dubai wants to be a global business capital, and it works hard saying everybody's welcome, and we want to double our population. And this is exactly what London's been doing, and especially successfully in the beginning of the 21st century. And this is why this country is what it is. And going backwards, I think, is very dangerous for economic reasons, but also for identity reasons. I think when the government talks about the risk of becoming an island of strangers, I think diversity brings you innovation, diversity brings you dynamics, and enriches everybody. And of course, people should express their concerns about immigrations, and we should accept democratic vote. But for me, as a dean of a global business school, I strongly believe that this country should be proud of its global universities. Truly outstanding academic system, which is a subject of envy of all other countries. United States is definitely ahead of everybody else in terms of quality of leading universities, but UK is definitely second, and it's much more global actually than the US university system. And for example, when we look at American business schools, they're less international than London Business School, and UK should be proud of this. UK should appreciate how its universities bring in talent from all over the world, contribute to the world, to the UK soft power, but also to the UK economy itself.
US academic institutions are under some threat at the moment. Would this be an opportunity for the UK actually to take advantage of that in order to do even better than they're already doing?
Yes, and I strongly believe in this, and actually just wrote an op-ed which should come out next week exactly about this. And I think we should welcome academics who feel threatened in the US. We should offer admissions to international students who don't feel safe going to the US right now. And we should do it not just because we see an opportunity there for our own sake. Remember, education and research are global public goods. And if academics who are now in the US are less productive, that's bad for everybody, not just the US, but the humanity as a whole. And it's not just an opportunity for UK universities to get better talent, but it's also an opportunity to contribute to the global public good, protecting research and innovation globally, supporting those students who would otherwise go to the US, but now are worried about going into the US. We can help them to implement their dreams and also to provide a safe and productive space for researchers who don't feel safe and productive at home now in the US.
We have a tradition on this Leadership Lab series where the last interviewee asks a question of the next one without knowing necessarily who it's going to be. So Shearer West, who's the Vice Chancellor of the University of Leeds, was my last interview, and she said, how do you know when you are thinking about big strategic changes or new initiatives within a university, how the people on the ground, the grassroots, what they're really feeling and how they might react to something, or just what it is that they really need?
I think it's a very difficult question. We talked about negative feedback. The problem is people, whatever you say that you welcome negative feedback, people would still be hesitant of bringing you bad news. And so you need to talk to everybody about everything. Sometimes people give you negative feedback about somebody else, not about you. So you get your feedback somehow, but you also need to run anonymous surveys. We just did engagement survey, and I'm reading through a couple of thousands of comments.
Wow.
It's somewhat depressing because anonymous comments are, of course, usually less positive than what people get to say in your face. But as an academic, I'm kind of used to it because academics have negative anonymous feedback both on teaching and research. When we teach, we collect anonymous feedback from students, and sometimes students are quite critical in their evaluation of how you teach and what you teach. And then, of course, in research, we send our papers to academic journals, and we get anonymous referee reports. And these are the people who are your friends, but what they say about your research is horrible. Ouch. And so academics usually are much thicker skinned than normal people reading bad stuff about themselves. But overall, I think this is very important to try to talk to everybody, and also keeping that in mind that whatever you say about importance of bringing negative feedback, critical feedback, people would still be more open in anonymous feedback forums. And so this is a very, very important channel. And I think we should not forget about this.
What would you like to ask the next person?
I would actually ask about how to keep our kids' generation more optimistic about the world. You can see that I believe in progress. History is on my side. If you look at the data, the world is getting better in the long run. But as they say in the financial markets, past performance is not a guarantee of future performance. Maybe our kids are right and the system is broken, but maybe it's also just negativity of social media. As I mentioned before, social media is more likely to disseminate critical negative information about the state of the world, and maybe Generation Z is just too much impacted by this negativity. And maybe this is something that drives some of them being less optimistic about the state of the world. So my question to the next guest is, if this is the case, how do we convince our kids that the world is not broken?
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Thank you very much for inviting me.